Jonathan Ifeanyi Obise is an astute professional with years of demonstrable experience collaborating with cross-functional teams across geographies and delivering on high-impact projects and programs in the construction, IT, and international development sectors. He holds an MBA from the University of South Wales, United Kingdom, and a civil engineering degree from Covenant University, Nigeria. He is a certified project management professional, PMP, and holds numerous certifications in the data and analytic fields. He has also completed and continues to run a number of short courses from top universities across the world, such as Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Johns Hopkins, the Wharton School, and others. He is the founder of Pareto Solutions Limited, a business and technology consulting firm providing technology solutions to organizations and businesses, with subsidiaries in the e-learning and HR and career consulting space, Pareto Institute, respectively. He currently serves as an international consultant on the data and analytic team of the United Nations, New York, United States. In this position, he works with 130 plus United Nations country teams across 160 countries to bring about better coordination, accountability, transparency in the very important work carried out by the United Nations country teams on ground. He is also an author of the book, The 26 Power Paradigm in the School of Destiny, a book he authored and self-published at the age of 21 during his final year at the Covenant University. The revised edition is currently in the press with Westbow Press, a subsidiary of Thomas Nelson Publishers, and will be made available across the world soon. In his leisure time, Mr. Jonathan does music, writes, and reads a lot. You can learn more about his professional journey on his LinkedIn profile. You can come to me for that. Ultimately, he loves God and loves all the Lord's loves. You may connect with him via his website. I'll provide that for you. And through the following avenues. I have it with me here. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Mr. Jonathan Obise for his keynote speech. You're welcome, sir.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be with you this afternoon, and a real privilege on my part. I just want to say, I think a few of the things that were being read out are sort of obsolete already. The book that he referenced that was in the press is already out of the press. Okay, but without further ado, today I'm here for the program for which we're gathered. And as have been rightly introduced, I'm Jonathan Obise, and I work with particularly on the topic I'll be speaking with, so I just want to highlight that. I work with the United Nations as an international consultant on data analytics. When you think of the United Nations is literally a labyrinth, in terms of you have the United Nations, you have so many organizations, UNICEF, WHO, FAO, some of you will know them. So the United Nations is like the mother of all of those organizations. So what we do is essentially to help the United Nations to show how the United Nations across countries is helping government to achieve sustainable development. And, as I go through my speech today, which I understand I have a very short time, I'll be speaking on the contribution of teachers to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Now, just to highlight a few things I'm going to touch on. So first off, I'm going to highlight some of the SDGs, an overview of the SDGs of the United Nations, because I believe as teachers, it's important that we understand how the work you do, what you do in your school, in your classes, wherever you find yourself, how that contributes to the overarching Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations is pursuing. And by the way, the Sustainable Development Goals, there's a goal of 2030 to achieve the SDGs by 2030. So we used to have the MDGs, for those of us who know the MDGs. The MDGs ended in 2015. So from 2015, the SDGs were instituted till 2030. So everybody is aiming towards 2030. So the United Nations organizations in Nigeria, the United Nations organizations across the world, they are all the work they are doing, fall under the umbrella of the SDGs. So I'll highlight a few of those SDGs that has to do with us. Then I'll also speak on the role of education in sustainable development. I will speak on the global teacher shortage. As much as possible, I'll try to be practical just so that you can have something you can actually hold by the time you leave this place. I'll also speak on the teacher's impact on sustainable development. I'll also highlight some of the SDGs. SDG 4 that talks about quality education. SDG 5 talks about gender equality. SDG 10 talks about reduced inequalities. SDG 17 talks about partnerships for the goals. For example, what is happening here? This is about SDG 17. You're partnering with different stakeholders to achieve the goal, of education and reduce inequality and all of that. Then I'll also highlight some of the challenges faced by teachers and, of course, the solutions and some of the best practices. And we'll also look at the future education and the SDGs. Okay, so with the short time that I have, I will try to do all of this. So first off, when we talk about the SDGs, what are we talking about? Like I mentioned, for the SDGs, some of us might be familiar with the SDGs, but some of us, I don't also want to assume that everybody here knows what the SDGs are. So the SDGs are, the SDG itself stands for Sustainable Development Goals, right? And the Sustainable Development Goals was instituted not just by the United Nations, but by countries across the world. So the United Nations is simply made up of countries across the world. So, for example, if you're familiar with politics, you will hear that soon the president will be going with his entourage to New York, to the United Nations to make presentations. That's because the United Nations is sponsored and made up of countries in the world. So, in 2015, the countries in the world under the umbrella of the United Nations came together and said, okay, let us have a goal that by 2030, we should be able to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 17. And that's how the 17 SDGs came about. Now, I wouldn't want to bore you with all the SDGs because there are a lot of them. But I will just highlight a few that has to do, with education. Are we together? Are we together? Hope I'm not losing my audience. Okay. So now, the SDGs themselves, like I mentioned, they are all interconnected in one way or the other. Now, first off, we have SDG 1, which is no poverty. Right? So the goal of nations, or the goal of the SDGs, is to say nations, as you're doing all your development, as government is giving money to organizations, the goal should be that you're able to lift the citizens to a point where there is no poverty. It's an ideal, right? And then everything that nations do should push towards that. Okay? So that is SDG 1 of the, in terms of the SDGs. Now, but let's look at first of the role of education in sustainable development. So when we talk about sustainable development goals, how does education help with sustainable development? So now, on sustainable development and education, the truth about it is when we think about education, education is the cornerstone for the SDGs. Without education, then there will be no discussion for the SDGs. Without education, there is no way we can lift the future generation of young people to have a life that is enviable and a life that is not, deep in poverty. So education is super important. As a matter of fact, all the SDGs take, I'll say their bearing from education. Because if there is no education, then the future generation is doomed. If there are no teachers to teach the young people in school about life, about skills in life, about how real life works, and all the things that are being taught in schools, then even the SDGs, everybody is just wasting their time. So education itself is super important because it lays the foundation for eradicating poverty, and breaking the cycle of poverty in communities. Now think about this. Africa had its own version of education, right? Before, we started getting, the colonialists came and they introduced us to different form of governance. We had our own and all of that, but they had, in a way, superior, and practices or superior systems. And they introduced us to those systems, and those systems were responsible for what we have today as a society, that we're not living in thatched houses, where they brought their technology on how to build different things, they brought their technology on manufacturing and all of that is part of education. So education is primary, to eradicating poverty. So when we talk about SDG 1, no poverty, that cannot be achieved without proper education. Now, education is also important when you think about gender inequality. There are societies where girls, of course, we know that this is even an issue around the world, where, girls are not permitted to go to school. They prevent them from going to school. And as a result of that, those mothers will not be able to raise the children properly to dominate in society tomorrow, to have all the skills that they need to succeed. So without education, there will continually be gender inequality in society, and that's why education is important. And of course, with education, then we can begin to think about fostering economic growth. Now, there are challenges, right, that we face with respect to qualified teachers, and that also poses a challenge to achieving the SDGs when the teachers themselves are not qualified. And that is why I like this kind of gathering, because you begin to hear things as teachers that normally within your schools you may not hear them. Within your circles of your teachers, you may not discuss these things, but it's important to understand how the little you're doing in your little corner is supporting the achievement of these sustainable development goals. Now, we have the challenge of shortage of teachers, not just in Nigeria, but literally across the world when you think about it. A lot of times, lack of training. You have few schools that go the extra mile to see to it that they train their teachers. Most of the time, when teachers are employed, that is the end. Whatever you learned in school, that is the end. And that's the only thing they continue to transfer to their students. And the schools, of course, that don't take the initiative to train the teachers, expose them to superior knowledge, will face the challenge of churning out students that are really not up to world-class standards. So those are some of the challenges we also have in education. And of course, this would impact on the SDGs massively. Now, SDG 4 talks about quality education. There can be no quality education without quality teachers. If the teachers are not of high quality, then the education itself cannot be of quality. The students themselves cannot be of quality. And that is why today, when you think as teachers, I believe some of us, you have students that go for competitions across the world, and you realize that some of those students, they face students that come from maybe educational systems that are far superior. And it's a result of the technology, it's a result of the training of the teachers, a result of the exposure, that the teachers have. So we have all of those challenges and how all of that, affects the SDGs. Now, for want of time, I may not be able to go into all the details of what I want to share with you, but I'll try as much as possible to provide this so that you can, go through them later on. Now, I just want to speak on, let me speak on the partnerships for the SDG goals. Now, I refer to the meeting we're having here. This is an example of partnerships because this meeting has brought different people from different walks of life to see how can we inspire the teachers, how can we speak to the teachers, how can we open the minds of the teachers to begin to see beyond the classroom, and how can you transfer all of that knowledge into what you do as a teacher. As I was introduced as a consultant for the United Nations, and I'm going to share a website with you that I believe for some of you who are interested in data, you can go there and you'll be able to see in terms of resources, how resources are being channeled, into the achievement of the SDGs across countries of the world. I would show you how you can just, for example, go to search for SDG 4 and you'll be able to see Nigeria. How much is Nigeria through the United Nations investing in SDGs? You'll be able to see that information, and that begins to open your mind to what is happening across the world. So partnerships are important. Now, there are challenges faced by teachers. I've highlighted some of those. Lack of resources, lack of training, high student to teacher ratio. You see one teacher to 100 students or even more than that, and all of that is a major challenge we have in our country and across the world. The teacher well-being, and all of that, that's also part of it. But let me speak about solutions just briefly. Solutions, teacher training. For proprietors that are here, it's important to train the teachers. For teachers that are also here, it's important for your own self, improve, search the internet, increase, expound your knowledge, go beyond what you know, and try to increase, in terms of your knowledge and also your expertise. And then, of course, technology. Use technology. We live in a world of internet. You're not limited to what you studied in school as teachers. Try to use technology to improve yourself. How many of us here have heard of ChatGPT? Let me see your hands. ChatGPT. Okay, it seems some of us have. Now, ChatGPT is an AI, artificial intelligence. As a teacher, you're no more limited to your textbooks. Now you can use AI tools to improve how you teach. And this is important for us to begin to use all of those. And then, of course, well-being. Now, this is for proprietors and all of that. It's very important, to look at how we can improve the well-being of teachers. I want to believe that all of this I'm sharing, are not just fictitious, but things you can work with. So as I round up, I would just want to share some resources with you that you can use in terms of how, you can improve yourself as a teacher, as a proprietor, or even improve your school to see to it that what you're doing is contributing towards the SDGs. Now, I mentioned a website. The first website I want to share is uninfo.org. I don't know if that's also being shared, if that can be put on the screen. So you can just write it down. Just write uninfo. That means uninfo.org. Now, that's particularly the project I'm working on, with different people anyways across the world for the United Nations. And what we do there is to help to show how countries in the world are contributing towards sustainable development. So if you just go to uninfo.org, you will see there, and you'll be able to search countries, search for Nigeria, and just search for the data, and you'll see a lot of information that would help, with respect to all that I've spoken about. Now, I just want to leave you with this quote by Nelson Mandela. He said, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." And this is what I'm going to leave you with. If you, as a teacher, continues to improve yourself, you will not just improve yourself, but you will end up improving generations and generations to come. It's been a pleasure sharing with you, and I want to hope that you've picked a thing or two from my presentation. Thank you so much.